Hey guys, welcome back to the Seiji Bard podcast. My name is Bard.
And I am Seiji.
And on the Seiji Bard podcast, we discuss health, wealth, business finance, and social issues. And today we're going to be talking about a social issue that is a hot button topic here in California and across the nation. We're going to be talking about, what's our title? The homeless homewreckers and...
the cancelers being canceled.
And the cancelers being canceled, which is, we're talking about the story where the students, there's a Palestinian student association. I forgot the exact title. Let me see if we can find it on slides. The Palestinian Solidarity Committee. This is at Harvard undergrad group. So we're gonna begin with, what do you want to start with? You want to start with the free speech?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're actually gonna have a little bit of a debate. We actually talked about this last night, and we had a pretty good, interesting debate. There's good points on either side, so we want to continue that debate, and we want to get your take. So definitely in the comments, let us know what you think about this idea of free speech and its consequences. All right. So I'll go ahead and start. I think so. Let's put out some facts first. So undergrad Harvard students, they put out a declaration or a statement stating that Israel was 100% to blame for the Hamas terror attacks in Israel.
That is correct.
Okay. So that's what they put out, okay? That's for the public to consume. Now, what's happening, the aftermath is we've got a lot of angry people.
Yep.
Which is normal because people get angry at political statements all the time, especially in this Mideast battle, Israel, Palestine. There's a lot of blame and stuff going back and forth. But I think where it got interesting is where law firms and potential employers for these students got involved, and they started to ask for their names so that they could blacklist them from any future employment.
Yeah.
Now, personally, I think everyone should have free speech, and I agree. I know we agree on that point, right?
Yes.
Everyone should definitely have free speech. And I believe that free speech really isn't free because consequences is where you pay.
Correct.
So maybe free speech is a misnomer.
There's no such thing as truly free speech.
Right. I think if you're going to have free speech, and if free speech is enjoyed by all, maybe there should be some protections for free speech. Not just saying it, but maybe, I don't know, maybe, you should be free from, in this case, harassment, which is what, is happening to some of the kids. But anyway, I know you. Go ahead and let us know how you feel about this part of it.
Well, one of my favorite movies is a movie named Talladega Nights. It's a really ridiculous movie. It's a comedy with Will Ferrell and Sacha Baron Cohen, who's a French racer. And it's completely idiotic movie, but in it, Will Ferrell will say whatever he wants, but he prefaces it by saying, with all due respect, you're a blank, 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 right? Mm-hmm. And because Will Ferrell is pretty stupid in this movie, he thinks that it's okay as long as he says, with all due respect.
With all due respect.
Okay? Mm-hmm. I think that we've got to a place in our society where we think that as long as we say, with all due respect, you can say whatever you want, even if it's ridiculous, cruel, and it hurts people's businesses. Okay? So when we're talking about this situation with the Harvard students specifically, we're talking about law firms now that are typically Jewish run.
Right, and I think that's why they...
Okay, yeah. That are saying we don't want these people. I think that's totally legitimate.
I think it's fair.
Okay, so then the thing is, when LeBron James or other basketball players who really know nothing about a political situation, whether it's in China or elsewhere, will say, well, we stand up for free rights and everything in the United States, but we also support China 100%.
Which doesn't have free rights.
Yeah, so then freedom of speech goes both ways. I 100% believe that people should be able to say almost whatever they want, with the exception of the classic, there's a fire when there's no fire in a theater and it results in people getting trampled to death.
Right.
But your free speech has consequences. And if you don't want to live with those potential consequences, then you probably should consider not saying it. You should put yourself in empathy. That's what it is. Like the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, kind of solves a lot of these problems in my opinion.
Okay, let's look at this for example. The kids at Harvard, they stated that Israel. Now let me state before I look like some sort of animal. Hamas is a terror group, 100%. What they did was disgusting, and they deserve to be hunted down and killed, 100%.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening. They're getting, look, in society, when you kill, typically the punishment is life in prison, or especially if it's first degree murder, which this was, and first degree murder with a sort of depraved mindset can get you the death penalty. And in this case, that's what's being executed, the death penalty. So now, that being said, what the kids said, now, if the kids said what Hamas did was beautiful, God is great, that sort of changes things, right?
Absolutely.
That, you're basically a terrorist at this point. You're basically a real terrorist sympathizer. Now, what the kids did say is Israel is 100% responsible for what happened.
Yeah.
Now, I believe they could have said it in a better way. And let me explain. Everyone, not everyone, I shouldn't say everyone knows, because everyone doesn't know this. The way, I'll quote what someone in Gaza said, a Palestinian said. When you treat people like animals, they behave like animals. Now, is that justification for terrorism? No. But it's an explanation for why people do animalistic things. And this is what these guys were doing. They were raping, killing, looting, pillaging, eating people's lunch in front of them, killing them. It was disgusting. What they did was disgusting. It was terror. It was demonic, right?
There's absolutely no justification.
There's no justification. Now, I believe two ideas can exist at the same time in this space when it comes to political things. Should we be killing Israelis and Jews? No. No one should be killing anyone. Is what Israel's doing to the people of Gaza wrong? Yes. I believe that you're creating a living hell for these people. They don't have...
Are we talking about in general or the specific situation that exists right now?
I'm talking about just in general. They have a very difficult life. They don't have
But the question, though, is why do they have a difficult life right now?
Because when the Jews decided they wanted to move back home, they came in and they decided to,
forcefully take land.
Right. So they decided to first, ask for it. We kind of discussed this in our last, which, YouTube is, I believe, throttling. Thank you, YouTube. Thanks, Google. Thanks for that. Yeah, it's funny how we're talking about free speech and here they are suppressing. I believe they're suppressing it because, anyway, it just dropped off a cliff. But Israel has been acting like, in some ways, what most people with bigger guns do.
But that's not how it started. It's not how it started.
All right, so
when it started, they wanted a two-state solution. they were in the minority. You had a bunch of Arab countries gang up and attack them. Miraculously, they lost, the Arab countries. This then established a place for the Jews. And now, over time, 2 more subsequent wars, they have taken more land from the Arabs who launched attacks against them. When you lose, there are consequences. You lose land, you lose territory. As we discussed in our last video, the Germans lost territory, Poland lost territory, Mexico lost territory. Those are consequences of losing a war. And it's absolutely sad that this has happened. But then, now fast forwarding to 2005, when the Israelis withdrew from Gaza, the Palestinians chose to elect Hamas, which is a terrorist organization.
They are terrorists, yes. Now, Hamas came about as a result of Israel's being in that region, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so
but that was also because their premise was there will never be a 2-state solution. We will eliminate all of the Jews. And just so you guys know, I have no bone in this fight for either group. It's just...
matter of fact.
Yeah.
All right, so let's take this. Have the Palestinians lost land, more and more land in the last 60, 70 years?
Yes, they have.
Okay.
Because they've lost 3 different wars.
Okay. So the wars are because they want their land, right? Now here's the thing. Should they have had to even fight a war to have their homeland?
Well, what happened is they had their territory. No one took their land. When the Jews first moved back, they bought land that was unsettled.
Right.
Okay, so they purchased unsettled land that was closer to the coast. It was what no one wanted.
Okay, so okay, so that land is there. Now, there are
when you fight a battle,
they have. Yeah, I understand. I get that. I get that point. When you fight, you lose land. You know, Mexico lost a bunch of land to the United States.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at the map, I might put a map here for context. I'm pretty sure the Palestinians don't want to live on the world's most dense,
it's not
population dense. That's one of the most population dense.
One of them.
Okay, so what's more? Okay, so it's very dense, and it wasn't like that before.
Correct.
Can we agree? Okay, so all they want is some kind of land. Now let's take it a step further.
They don't want some kind of land. Their government says they want all of the land.
Right.
That's where we have to be really clear.
Right. So what we have here is typical colonial type of behavior, and not just colonial, but
from which side?
From Israeli side. We have
no. You have colonial. Okay, you have maybe a colonial mentality from one side and an annihilationist perspective from the other side.
Right. Now let me ask you this: if you were living in a country and then some diasporans came back and you had your land and they were like, move over, we want this land. I mean, you could look at the map and see that Israel's obviously winning, right? Wouldn't you go to war with them? I mean, I know we've discussed in the past, the British and India. You would go to war, would you not?
I think that what we're talking about is kind of different. For example, these people were living on land. So you're saying, I don't want you as my neighbor. That's what you're saying. So then, let's put it in a different perspective. You're a white person who's been owning a huge plantation. Now there's free slaves, and you say, well, I don't want the black person as my neighbor. So, sure, I have to give up part of my land, but I don't want you as my neighbor. So then, I think there's a difference if you have unused land. And this was land that was not being occupied. They're saying the Jews didn't come in and start pushing the Palestinians out. They started moving in as neighbors.
So let me ask this. If it's unoccupied, who'd they buy it from?
They bought from the British government or other Palestinians or whoever.
Okay, so
whoever the government was in charge of that territory.
There's a ton of land in Africa and in the United States that's not being occupied.
Yep.
It's still owned. And the fact that they had to purchase it means there was an owner. Doesn't matter if you're living on it or not. So now the question becomes, all right, so Hamas wants to get rid of them. Okay, so Hamas wants to get rid of them. They don't want them to exist as a state.
Correct.
Israel says they want a two-state solution, but with each incursion, they keep taking more land, right?
For those listening, just keep in mind that even in 2006, roughly 80% of Palestinians living in Gaza wanted a two-state solution.
Right.
But despite what the majority of the Palestinians individually said they wanted, they collectively voted for a terrorist government, Hamas.
Right. Now, at the time, did they know that Hamas was going to start killing and doing all that stuff?
They knew that Hamas was a terrorist organization.
When Hamas was voted in, did they say, we're here to start killing Jews?
If we voted for the KKK, would we expect the treatment of minorities to improve? Or
what was in their mission statement is what I'm saying.
It's basically in their mission statement. It says that we're going to eliminate the state of Israel.
Okay. All right. Okay, but from reports that are coming out, I know Jimmy Dore covers this. I think the Young Turks cover this as well, and some other news agencies. They say Israel was, what's the word? They were
baiting them.
They were a part of the creation of Hamas in some respects, and they were even giving Hamas money.
Maybe to stay in their own place or whatever.
So why would they fund a terrorist organization that has...
I haven't read any of that. I don't believe that. But if they basically baited the Palestinians into voting for a government so they could just go in and eliminate them, well,
I think that might be a fair point. I'll concede that point because we did discuss that. I think that they voted them in to then radicalize them and then use them as terrorists to then further annex land.
Well, I believe
that's the strategy.
I don't think they radicalized them and turned them into terrorists. I think that they were already terrorists.
Yeah, but I think they were already terrorists, but I think they made them worse now. I think they did things to further I think they put a turbo in their plan.
Yeah.
And I think they're manipulating them and using them. And we discussed that. That's probably why our videos...
I do believe they're being manipulated.
I think they're being manipulated. All right, so let's go back to this. So the Palestinians, before all of this started, had a sizable amount of land, right?
Sure.
Who has all the land now?
The Israelis, mostly.
Is anyone controlling Israel's power and water flow and all that good stuff?
No, because they built the infrastructure.
Okay, so so before Israel got there, and Palestinians had electricity 70 years ago, did they not?
No, they really didn't.
Did they have water though?
Just to give you an idea, most parts of the world did not have electricity 70 years ago, and the water they would have been from wells primarily, wells or aqueducts from a long time ago.
Okay, so all right, so
just to give you an idea, when I first went to India as a kid, water was from wells.
Okay, and it was
so we're talking 75, 80 years ago.
All right, so let's okay, so that I was trying to look for an angle there, but let's look at this. Israel wants a two-state solution, correct?
Yes.
If you want a two-state solution, which means self-determination for the Palestinians, why would the Palestinians not have access to controlling their own water and electricity?
Because they haven't built it.
Israel has... Okay.
If they're not responsible for building those things for all of those people, least of all,
they're hindering them from
when they have a terrorist organization that... Israel's basically said, since Hamas took over and canceled elections in 2007, so just to be clear, since 2007, the Palestinian citizenry not the Palestinians, the Gazans have had absolutely no say in their government because Hamas canceled all subsequent elections. So they've been ruling as a dictatorship since.
Right. Okay. Guys, we'll be right back. We're going to take a quick break. All right, so the Palestinians they have all these homes that they've built. They have a power plant there, but it requires diesel fuel.
Yep.
Are we stating, so they have all these homes that they've built, are we stating that the Palestinians, with all their friends in the Arab community who have infrastructure, are we stating that the Palestinians are incapable of building their own infrastructure when it comes to power and water, and that they don't, are we stating that they don't want to control it? I mean, you may not know the answer to that, but
I don't know the answer to that.
Right.
But right now, the reason no supplies are going into their country and why they're dependent on others is because they have not built that infrastructure out.
Well,
they've had a government, and this is where they are culpable. They have elected a government that no other nation wants to deal with. Okay, and that goes for the Egyptians, that goes for other people. They are recognized around the Middle East as extremists, if not terrorists. Okay, on the West, we'll say they're terrorists. In the Arab world, they're still extremists.
Okay.
And because of that, no one's willing to help them.
All right, let's look at it like this. Before Israel came, Hamas wasn't there.
Correct.
So Israel's existence in that region created Hamas.
I disagree with that.
So
But yeah,
why-
you could say that.
Well, would Hamas be there? Would that sort of militant government be there if Israel wasn't there doing what they were doing?
That's hard to say.
Would Hezbollah be active in Lebanon if Israel wasn't in the region doing what they're doing?
Hard to say.
They would have no reason. Israel is the impetus, is the driving force behind that sort of political radicalism. I think that's a fair statement.
In the world, you have to deal with change. The only constant, as they say, is change. And you can't look at a map from 100 years ago and say, well, this is what, or actually, if it was 110 years ago, and say this is what Germany's boundaries are. About 1/3, half of Germany is gone, as I said before. And that's because they lost 2 wars. This is because of change and migrations.
All right.
And with Hamas, whether or not the Arab world wants Israel to exist or doesn't exist or not exist, it does. It is a fact. And you can either come to terms with that peacefully, or you can continue to engage in war over that.
I think,
And talking about whether or not Hamas exists because of Israel's existence or Hezbollah, these are entities that are not able to deal with change, which is a fact. And if you can't deal with change, then changes are coming your way.
well, war is how they lost land, right?
Yes.
So these entities, they don't believe in the same sort of conventional warfare that a lot of the world believes in, right? They are, for the most part, theocratic, Muslim-led nations. Islamic nations.
Yeah.
They're Arabic speaking, so they have a close relationship with some of their Arabic neighbors. Their warfare is jihad. So, that being said, they wouldn't refer to themselves as terrorists, would they?
No, they're freedom fighters or
They're freedom fighters, right. Now, I haven't read large swaths of the Quran, so I'm not totally sure of how jihad works, but I do know that they do some pretty heinous things in there. And killing people is what jihad is. But it's, killing... Anyway, I'm not sympathizing with Hamas. I'm giving you an explanation of who they are, why they exist, and the underpinnings of their societies being theocratic, being that they have a religion at the top, and everything is filtered through that lens. So
let me be clear for our audience. In terms of my position would be the same if the Jews had been continuously occupying the Holy Land for the last 2,000 years, and Palestinians moved back. And the Jews were in Gaza. It doesn't matter what side is there. I look at it from one side won, one side lost.
Right.
And there are consequences to losing. And you can't draw and pull out an old map and say, well, this is the way the world is. Like, to give you an idea, my great-grandfather gambled away about 10,000 acres in India, right? Okay? I can't go back and say, well, hey, that's actually my house. You need to move out of there.
Right. I get that point.
Someone in the past made decisions that have affected everyone in the future.
Right. Okay, so guys, we are talking about free speech. Seiji's made some good points. Let's get back. So we wanted to just give you a little background on how things are, why they are. Now,
with the students.
Right. Why the students, we need to understand why the students are saying what they're saying, number one. They're saying Israel is 100% responsible for this. And the thing is
keep in mind, it'd be one thing for these people to make this statement if they were from some small school that doesn't have a good track record. But at Harvard, Yale, the Ivy League schools, they have access to the best professors,
right,
the best information that any of us have. So they're not from Riverside Community College or Lane Community College. They're from Harvard. Okay, and when they're making these utterances, that what we're saying is this is the best and brightest of our society currently that are making these statements.
Statements. Now, here's the thing. That's a great point. Best and brightest. They're Harvard students, obviously educated, very smart people.
So if they can't analyze this critically,
well, I think they are. I think they have.
Yeah,
and I think they've come to a conclusion. And I think the way they worded it is terrible. And I think they should have prefaced it with, we don't support terrorism. But so-and-so's foreign policy has created these crazy terrorists. Terrorists wouldn't be there. Like, for instance, I'm not too well versed on the IRA back in the 90s, but
it was actually earlier. The Irish Republican Army.
They were doing terrorist type of activities. You know, these groups don't exist in a vacuum.
I agree.
They do things for a reason. Now, should they be killing people like that? No. I don't agree. But I can logically piece together and connect the dots why they would state Israel's responsible for this. I can see it. And here's the thing.
And they're free to say that.
They're free to say that. I can see why they would say that. It's like saying the United States is responsible for September 11th. Our foreign policy has hurt people in the Middle East, has oppressed people, and people wanted to attack us. Makes sense. It makes sense. But because we are imperialist, we're not going to change our foreign policy. We're going to strengthen our military and we're going to fight back and we're going to grind them further down into subjection. That's how imperialism works. And I think Israel, why we have such a close relationship with Israel, and you see Biden was over there like not even 2 weeks after this terror attack. Meanwhile, other disasters here in America, Biden wouldn't even show up sometimes.
Well, here's the thing. In our world, we have freedom of speech, right? Roughly speaking, in the United States, we mostly have freedom of speech. Now, there are limits, and you don't want to delete yourself by saying something that proves too controversial. But let's say we take this and we say 9/11 was not caused by a bunch of goat herders living in caves that probably didn't know how to use a computer, right? They were able to take over these planes. Now, if you take this position, you say, well, it wasn't these people. It was, in fact, the U.S. government, and you're too vociferous in your support of that point of view, then you might find yourself not here anymore, right?
Yeah.
You might not be among the living. Okay, now, there are other countries, for example, if you say something that's anti Xi Jinping, you might find yourself deleted for a lot smaller of an offense. Okay? But now, let's say you and I held some of these views, and then we said we wanted to apply to the U.S. State Department. Would the U.S. State Department employ us?
They wouldn't, because by the nature of our country, we are imperialistic.
But the thing is, then there's
They wouldn't,
consequences
because-
to our free speech.
Right, so we are, yeah, that's true. But the thing is if we're not on board with imperialism, and see, the State Department's not a disinterested party. And neither are the people who are creating the blacklist for... It's obvious that the people who are creating the blacklist are pro-Israel. Now, I'm not against Israel having a state. I want everyone to be at peace. I'm for a two-state solution. I said that in my last video.
Hamas isn't, though.
Hamas isn't, right. But, they just have to deal with it. If they want to live, they need to deal with it. But I'm for a two-state solution. But I personally, look, if you see, the thing that Hamas's problem is the problem is they don't have a military strong enough to fight Israel. If they had a conventional military with tanks and jets and that kind of stuff, it would just look like a normal war, and they would do normal things that normal countries do when they go to war. Because they don't have that, they're forced into asymmetric attacks against soft targets.
Yeah.
Which is utterly disgusting. And they're killing kids, and they're kidnapping, and they're raping. That's disgusting.
I think
no one can get
you're being too nice to them. I think that Hamas has had too many generations of inbreeding, which have led to absolute idiocy on their part, and now they're faced with total annihilation. And again, I agree with what Bard said in our last show, which is you are never going to be able to kill enough Hamas people to eliminate that, because it'll just be another branch. I mean, it might call itself Hamas. It doesn't really matter. There will be another one.
Yeah, they're always going to pop up. But the thing is as long as there's perceived wrongs. See, the thing with Hamas is, like I was saying, if they had a military, there would be a normal war against Israel. And see, there's a reason why the United States State Department supports Israel with weapons and everything else, because Israel has imperialistic qualities to it. And the United States is about that.
Well, I think that would be simplifying it. I think that it's because you have trade with a legitimate nation that can happen with Israel. There's nothing that you're going to get out of dealing with a bunch of poverty-stricken Gazans. So it's not just about being imperial or not imperial. It's about trade. I think that the United States shouldn't give 1 cent to either Hamas or to the Israelis. They shouldn't give anything. Last week we said we're going to give another $105 billion to these places, and that kind of goes into our next topic, which is homelessness. But we should deal with our problems here before we waste our time on anything over there.
I agree. All right, so let's get back to the free speech. All right, so I have some arguments. So now that we've kind of set up the situation, we've had a little debate about Hamas, their existence, why they're there, why Israel's fighting. Hamas is fighting a losing battle, which is why they've resorted to terrorism, because they don't have a proper military that can actually fight Israel. So would it be any better if they were attacking Israel with medium-range rockets from an actual military and they had tanks? And would it be any better?
No.
If they were attacking military targets?
If they're attacking military targets, yeah.
It'd be a war.
I have a problem with either side singling out and attacking civilians.
Right. The civilian part is where it becomes disgusting, because the civilians had nothing to do with it.
But then again,
that's the terrorism and raping and all that stuff. That's all like crazy stuff. Like, why are you doing that?
Well, that's to go to your point. That's a part of total war when you are fighting from a very disadvantaged position.
Right.
So
These
you're
are
going to
things that
just
you-
do whatever you can to terrorize another group of people.
This is what you do. If the Palestinians had a legitimate army with weapons and funding, let's say they're being funded by Iran, and they had tanks and planes, and they had an ability to fight Israel, and Israel could see that, I think what would happen is there would be no war. They would cancel each other out, and they would come to the table and have discussions. But when it's so lopsided, when you have one of the most powerful militaries in the world, they can sort of dictate how things go. And they can manipulate you using your religion against you because they know, because you believe in jihad so much and you think, because of your religious beliefs, we'll just use their religious beliefs against them. And we'll allow them to believe that they can beat us, and then when they try, we'll crush them, and then we'll take more land. They're annexing more land to make a
buffer.
A buffer. So Gazans are going to lose more land, and I don't think they're going to learn their lesson. To be honest, I don't think there is a lesson, because as long as you subscribe to jihad, you will, and as long as you think you're David and they're Goliath, and you're somehow going to win, you're going to continue to lose these battles. So anyway, let's go to free speech now. Do these students have the ability? Are they? It doesn't even matter if they're correct or not, because for instance, I
don't care if they're correct.
We live in cancel culture, guys. We exist in cancel culture. People can come out and say things like inflammatory things like there are only two genders, and everyone will lose their mind on
Wait a
one
minute,
side.
there aren't?
Right? Exactly. Right? People will say things that there are only two genders, and that'll make people lose their mind. And people get canceled for that kind of stuff under free speech. So you can have free speech, and even if you are correct in what you're saying, you can get canceled. Have we not seen that?
Yes.
Have we not seen people lose their jobs because they don't agree with
the 57 genders,
or the 1,000+ genders, or whatever it is? We've seen people lose their jobs. We've seen threat of arrest, even. Okay, we've seen laws made. So we're talking about a lot more than just terrorism. We're talking about cancel culture. We're talking about the threat of free speech. Now, let's say that. So what happens is when businesses say we're going to blacklist people, that has a chilling effect on free speech.
Yep.
So even though you have free speech, it's not really free, because you can't really say what you want to say. Now, there's a question of anonymity.
Maybe you shouldn't say what you want to say all the time.
Right. So now there's the question of anonymity. So this group, their names weren't necessarily publicized, but people went and got that information that was supposed to be, that they didn't give up freely. Mm-hmm. They went and found it, dug it up, and now people are doing what is considered textbook harassment. Now, we do have electronic harassment laws in this country. You cannot do, there are certain things that you can do electronically to terrorize people, and you can go to jail for some of this stuff. So now what's happening to some of these students are, an organization decided that they were going to go and they were going to put these people's pictures on a truck, display truck, and they were going to drive around with their names and faces. For what? Because they had an opinion that Israel's well, they didn't. The way they said it I don't agree with, and they're walking it back now. Let's see if we can get some of this some of these statements. Let's actually go back here. Anyway, there's I know you had a comment. Just hold that thought for a second. There's a tweet here by. Can you read that? The person's name? Something Tangri.
Mohini Tangri.
Okay, so what she says is, I'm a Harvard law student, so I know many members had no say in whether their organization signed either letter. Many weren't even notified that their organizations were considering doing so. No need for this level of harassment. So what was happening? So what's happening is, some people weren't even aware that their names, that this statement was made, and it was put out on their behalf. Now they're suffering harassment.
Well, this will be a part of their educational experience that they don't forget.
They will never forget.
Make sure you are aware exactly of what groups that you're involved with.
All right, let me ask you.
That's what it comes down to.
Let me ask you this: should people now we have laws against harassment, right? Mm-hmm. Should people be able to harass people due to their free speech?
Well, I don't think you could look at it and say it's harassment. Maybe it's just informing others. So I strictly speaking, I say yes.
Okay.
But I think that depending on how you massage that and classify it, I think it's fair game.
Let me bring another point to the audience. You guys check this out. So
I mean, look at it this way. Someone could look up and say, well, Facebook could publish a list of all the different things that I have liked, right? Which is what they use for marketing. I mean, and certain posts will pop up for me that they won't for you or someone else. And that could be, I've already signed away my rights for Facebook to use that. And
right.
So, there are consequences.
Okay, let's put it this way. DJ Vlad, mm-hmm. who's pretty prominent on YouTube and in the hip hop world, he not only interviews actors, started off as a DJ, but he now is interviewing actors. He's a Russian American who's pretty involved in the hip hop world.
Mm-hmm.
He at the moment is criticizing DJ Khaled, who's a Palestinian American,
mm-hmm.
and Drake, who is a Jewish Canadian,
mm-hmm.
but now living here in America, two of the most prominent people in their groups globally. He says that Drake is the most famous Jewish person on the planet. That's what he says, and he's probably correct. DJ Khaled is arguably, he says, the most famous Palestinian American or Palestinian on the planet. Now, his argument is, and he was on the Breakfast Club arguing this, his argument was, they're not saying anything about what's happening in that region, and he is criticizing them for their lack of free speech, for their lack of statement. So it seems like whatever you do, there's some sort of blowback.
Exactly. We live in a different world.
Where
you have a constant information drip that is going into your phone and then into your brain. So you have to make some statement. I mean, how hard is it for these people to make a statement and say, you know what, we are in total support of all of the civilians. We care about these people. Atrocities on both sides are wrong. And we still don't want the United States or our government, whether it's Canada or the United States, to be involved with this conflict. That's all it comes down to. Navigate a middle road. If you truly believe that. I truly believe that atrocities committed, whether it's by the Palestinians against the Jews or the Jews against the Jews against the Palestinians, is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I also believe that the world would be a better place without the United States sticking its foot into someone else's home.
Imperialism.
Now, but that being said, if these people don't want to say anything, it's probably better not to say anything than it's to say something that supports only one side. Because you know what? If I'm an artist, I don't like hip hop. So there are dumb people who are going to listen to your music that are Palestinian, and dumb people who are going to listen to your music that are Jewish. And it doesn't matter, because they both are going to pay you in some form of currency or Bitcoin or whatever it is.
Greenbacks. Okay, let's look at it this way. There are people who, now, in my opinion, there are people in America who come out and solely support Israel.
Mm-hmm.
They ignore what's happening in Palestine.
Well, I think that you can look at it and say, what happened 14, 15 days ago in terms of that terrorist attack, you should be able to support Israel almost completely.
Right. I mean, I support Israel in that respect, but
retaliating against a bunch of civilians. But at a certain point, the rest of the Middle East and Arab countries have failed to dislodge Hamas. The Palestinian people themselves have been held hostage by an occupying power, Hamas. They elected them at first. Hamas canceled elections, and now the Israelis are helping them remove this toxic government. This is analogous to Hitler and the Nazis being removed from power in Germany.
Okay.
And this was good for Germany to be able to have sane people operating and controlling their government again.
All right. So we have. All right. So there are people here who. So the group at Harvard is supporting Palestine. Okay, they support that one side. Now, Palestine's not our ally, so somehow their lives are not as important.
I don't think anyone is saying that has.
That's the messaging.
From who?
The media. What happens with our sympathies are with the Jews. Let's be honest. It's with Israel. We're an ally. President Biden went over to shake hands with Netanyahu, not Palestinian leaders.
No, he actually tried. He tried.
Okay.
They basically canceled their meeting with him.
That was
King Abdullah or whoever it was in
Saudis, I think.
No, not in Saudi. It was in Jordan.
Jordan, okay.
And that was as a representative of them. So then there is a lot of American sympathy for the Palestinian plight, but it's a lot.
Not with our government.
I disagree with that. I think there's a lot. It's just when you're dealing with someone that is the equivalent of ISIS, well, there isn't going to be sympathy for that. I mean, we got to remove you first, and once we have some other people in charge, well, then humanitarian aid and everything else can start up.
All right, let's look at it this way. Last discussion we talked about Hamas. We talked about the terror in Gaza, terror in Israel. We came to the conclusion that Hamas was running the show and the people really had no say.
Correct.
So Hamas...
We're helping them out now.
Hamas is different from the Palestinian people.
Yeah. They're extremists.
They're different. They don't represent Palestinian people's views, for the most part. Maybe some support Hamas, but a lot of them don't. And I think Biden mentioned that. But the thing is when anyone comes out in support of Palestine, they're viewed as terrorists. Because Palestinian and Hamas are one entity. That's how we see them.
You and I both support Palestinian civilians. We're not viewed as terrorists. And
some people might view us that way.
Well, and they can. Go for it. I mean, because I'm not going to surrender my free speech rights to a bunch of Jewish extremists either. Just like I wouldn't to Palestinian extremists, I wouldn't to Jews or any extremists. Because in this case, the middle road is a good road.
All right, so now let's talk about the lasting effects of. Let me get into this. There's actually some more questions. Well, let me say this first. Yeah. All right, guys. When we get back, we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we are going to continue this discussion. Then we're going to go ahead and move into our next topic. We'll be right back. All right, guys. We are back, and I want to read this statement. This is from the New York Post. This is something they had a video.
And this came out a month before this whole conflagration.
Right. Yeah, so about a month, 3 weeks, because this is about 2 weeks. So about 3 weeks. So Harvard has been ranked as the worst school for free speech in 2023 by the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education. Harvard was ranked the worst. And there was a bunch of schools on there, but Harvard was worst. They were the worst. Now, it's interesting how this Palestinian group even exists in Harvard.
Here's a question for you. They obviously probably knew about this and free speech on campus. So then why would you make that utterance if you're at a school that gets a huge amount of funding from Israeli and Jewish law firms and groups, okay? And you know that by whatever metric is being used here, It is one of the worst places in the country for free speech.
I think countries. Let's look at it in terms of countries. Let's look at
These are the best and the brightest.
I know they are.
Bart.
I think they still are.
It's making me question. It's making me question.
I think we're in the era of pushing the limits, and I think when you have a track record like Harvard, I think it's going to make people want to speak up even more because they're bucking the system, and we can see that all throughout history when it comes to resistance to being counterculture. I think.
Well,
no, and I think this organization exists because of America's lopsided affections for Israel.
Look at Julian Assange and Edward Snowden. They were bucking the system, and where are they now?
Right, exactly.
In Russia or wherever.
Yes, yeah. So, and see, you could argue that. See, some people just to kind of go to Assange and Snowden. Some people would argue, well, why did they do what they did? Why didn't they just go through the proper channels? Well, they couldn't, and they had to do something asymmetric. So, WikiLeaks was a sort of asymmetric type of media organization. Their servers were in like a bunker in Sweden or whatever, in Switzerland. They politically and strategically put their servers in a place where they couldn't be taken down. They have all sorts of backups and stuff, and they had to do what they did because of the people in power wanted them gone. So in terms of journalism, they were viewed. A lot of the people in power viewed them as terrorist, or they have spy or traitor. There's terms for people who go against the system and who do things that challenge the narrative of the powerful. And when it comes to journalism, they fell within this space of journalistic terrorism. They were doing things and so Hamas became a terrorist organization because they didn't have the power to go up against Israel and the United States. Anyway, in terms of free speech, the kids. I want to talk about when it comes to the students. I want to talk about consequences. Now, let's look at criminals. For example, California, Governor Newsom passed a bill, made into law, where we have this saying in America: when you commit a crime and you go to prison, you're doing your time. You are paying your debt, quote unquote, to society. Now, what was happening is prisoners, once they were released from prison, they would continue to pay their debt to society, even though it was paid in the prison. So now there was Jim Crow level discrimination in terms of jobs, housing, etc. Because you're a felon now. So you never paid your debt to society. So now what we have is, Governor Newsom rolled that back, and I think that's the one good thing that I can say that he's done that I agree with. Because they've gone to jail, they've paid their time, they should have the ability to reset. Now what we have with these students is a situation where they are now, even though they've rolled it back, they're being blacklisted, and a blacklist is usually for life. They're being blacklisted by several law firms, agencies.
There's other law firms to go to. And even when you're looking at the situation that you admire and like by Governor Newsom, I think that it should always be available for a company to look up and say, well, this guy was a felon. Do I want to put him in this situation? This guy was a child molester. Do I want to have him working at my local nursery or whatever? And I know that you can't.
Well, the child molester is not covered in this one.
Correct. Well, whatever. The point is, I think that you should serve your time and then go back into the population. But it should be information that other people can look up about you as well, even in the future.
What would be the purpose of that, though?
Because I don't want you at my company. That's what it comes down to.
So if you paid your debt to society...
You paid your debt to society, but you have to recognize that society, there are different people that are components in that society. And I might say, well, I still don't want to accept you into my company. Yeah, I might be part of the same social club, but I don't want you at my company. I don't want you working around my family or other people I care about.
And that's the reason why they created this law, to get rid of this discrimination.
Yeah, and I disagree with that.
Right. I think if you're gonna,
there are consequences to actions, and some of those consequences, unfortunately, will last your lifetime.
I think child molesters deserve, because they can't be rehabilitated.
Well,
that's why theirs doesn't go away.
Maybe they were born that way.
Well, they can't be rehabilitated.
But the thing is, the point is, the way biology is going is maybe they were born that way.
Well, maybe the free speech activists who spoke up at Harvard were born that way.
Exactly. And so the thing is, there are consequences. No, but there are consequences for that. There are consequences. Just because you were born different doesn't mean that, well, everyone has to put up with your circus act.
In our discrimination laws in this country, if a person has a specific political belief, you can't discriminate against them. This is a political belief. So that there's grounds for a lawsuit now. Those law firms have opened themselves up to litigation, I believe, and I believe they will be sued at some point. Because you also have, like, for instance, in Europe, let me give you an example. Google, the French, I think they were leading the charge on this. You remember they had the right to be forgotten bill, or whatever they were trying to get passed?
No.
So let's say you get online and you make a mistake and you say something online. Everybody sees it. You look like an idiot online, and you fundamentally change your position. You're like, you know what? I don't see that. I don't see that anymore. I've grown up. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with the old me. That happens all the time. They're arguing the right to be forgotten. Why? Why? Because no one has the right to be discriminated against forever for a political position that they have. That's why. And I think
private companies
so
be able to discriminate against you.
Right. So but they forced Google to stop indexing some of this data, and now they have the right to be forgotten. So that means, basically you cannot monetize stuff in perpetuity to the detriment of a person, even after they've changed their mind or their political position. So, for instance, there's a video I watched recently where a Hezbollah fighter changed his life, became a Christian. He's done with that life. He loves people. He's hugging Jews. He loves the Jews. He said in the video, I don't even know why I hated Jews. Never met one. And now he's fundamentally changed his position. Can we continue to discriminate against him for his political position?
I think that if an individual company wants to, they can. I think that.
But we have laws that are against it.
If I was looking for someone, I would listen to his story and I would want to hire him. And I think that's a beautiful thing about the United States. But I think that by all means you could say, well, I don't want this person, and I think that's legitimate. No one should be forced to hire anyone.
No one's forced to hire anyone, but when you're creating a campaign and then there was one guy who was like, I think the professor, don't hire my students list. It's crazy.
Well, the professor should be in trouble for that.
That's insane. Like, don't hire my students because they see, look, we've already discussed, everyone knows Israel's committing war crimes. We know this. It's open for the world to see, and anytime they're questioned about this by journalists, well, look at what they did to us. That's not a legitimate response from a responsible power.
A war crime right now, or are you talking
tons of them? All throughout their history, there's tons of documented war crimes.
But let's talk about right now, in the last
right
2
now,
weeks.
yeah, they're in the last 10 days, 12 days, because I heard this 2 or 3 days ago. They have targeted and destroyed 18 ambulances, 20 ambulances, and have killed 18 workers. That is a war crime.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
So the fact, whether or not they attacked the hospital, I personally initially, and I'll I was gonna do a video on this, and I'll correct myself. I'll tell you guys how I felt. I thought they attacked the hospital, possibly by mistake. But a U.S. general came on and he was explaining. They showed a video, And I didn't even really believe the video initially because you can do that with AI. But what I realized was, here's what I realized where the general was right. And I don't think he's biased. He was on CNN and I watched it and I don't think he's biased. What happened was the rocket was full of fuel and it had initially launched, but the engine failed. This is why commercial airplanes can dump fuel. So when in the event of a crash landing, they don't blow up. They just crash and it falls apart. So they will dump fuel and then they will do the crash landing. So this rocket was full of fuel. So there were some good because the evidence for a lot of these rockets that land in Israel, they don't kill that many people and the damage is not that great. But this damage was excessively great, and it was because there was a lot of fuel in the rocket. So that was on the part of the terrorists or the freedom fighters, whatever we want to call them. Whoever has the power of the media gets to write the rule book and create the imagery they want the world to see, and that's how the story is being told from our side. So in terms of consequences, this professor, don't hire my student list. These are kids. And not only are they kids, they're undergrads, they're kids. At 25, your frontal lobe finishes developing. I don't think any of them are at the age of 25. Most students, I would say most students who go to Harvard or any Ivy League school, especially undergrad, are typically traditional students. That means
18 to 22.
18 to 20, yeah. They are kids, and for them to pay for a misstatement. Look, we've had President Donald Trump as an adult make misstatements. We've had adults like Biden make misstatements.
Well, I feel in the case of Trump, he's going to pay for it for the rest of his life. In the case of Biden, he has never paid for any of his misstatements at any point in his career.
Because he's protected.
Whether he was calling integrated schools a racial jungle, or completely stealing British Labour leader's speech, or lying about any of the hundreds of things that he's lied about. So
exactly. So his free speech doesn't have consequences, yet a bunch of kids have consequences. He's protected. So we were discussing this the other day, and guys, if you're enjoying this conversation, definitely leave us a like. And actually, I'm more interested in comments. And definitely subscribe because there's going to be a lot more of this, okay? Let us know what you think about this. Leave us long comments. Seiji enjoys your comments. I enjoy them as well. And he will respond. If he likes your comment, he will respond. But let me say this. They are protected. Our political leaders are protected. They can say stuff. The media won't report on it. But here, these kids are being harassed. And they're being blacklisted from employment. Well, and some of them already walked it back. I don't think it's fair. I think it's fair for them to get a little bit of chastising in the media, maybe a little bit of criticism, but that should be it. I don't think taking it to the next level and having trucks driving around with their pictures and like they're criminals. I don't think that's fair. I think that's childish and petty.
I think it's childish and petty, but I think that it'll also teach them in the future that there's consequences to.
Oh, they've learned
to just saying something. I mean, the only people who get away with this kind of stuff are politicians. These
maybe CEOs.
These liars in Congress and the executive office, whether that is Republican or Democrat, they get away with saying and hurting people with idiotic statements
all the time.
They are completely culpable for what happens in the pot they stir up.
Let me also state, there are services, you guys may have seen them, there are services here in the United States and globally that will remove things from the internet for you. Okay, they'll write letters, get stuff taken off of databases, off of servers, and they'll also do things with the algorithm, like put out good news about you, good things, to drive down the search results for bad stuff. Okay, so there's a demand for that, not only for people but for corporations. Well, corporations are doing the same thing.
That's going to increase.
It's going to increase.
It's like what is it? Social media scrubbing.
Right.
It's what you need.
So in our debate here, if corporations are doing this to protect their image and no one should have everyone should have a second chance, except child molesters. And obviously some other crimes too, murderers and rapists. I don't think
it's actually interesting because you look at this. There are a lot of companies that get away with it, just as Bart is saying, because there's a lot of Germans. Some of Germany's richest companies are owned by the descendants of former Nazis who acquired their family wealth and companies because of Nazi-era laws, and their great-grandparents or grandparents were, Hitler's goons. They were his corporate goons who stole money from all over the place, and this still enables these companies and families to live very comfortable lives.
All right. So I had a couple questions here. I think we're kind of done with this debate. We're kind of done? So. I think we've kind of covered some of the main points. Some of the questions, I'll ask some of these questions for the chat. If you guys want to answer some of these questions in the chat, when does free speech become criminalized? We talked about yelling fire in a crowded theater. Obviously, that's criminalization of free speech.
Should free speech be guarded in academia, and if it's done in an academic way?
Right. Is blacklisting people? Does the blacklisting of people equate to criminalization of free speech in some way? Typically you're punished for crimes. When corporations, when you apply for a job, they do a background check to see what you've been convicted of. Not what you've said on social media per se, but companies are changing. So when they find you've been convicted of a crime, that's when they decide to hire you. But in this case, we're pushing the envelope. Now that you make a statement as a student in school saying Israel is 100% a political statement. This is a political statement. And now companies are using that to find reason not to hire you. So I guess, should that be something that you're punished for in perpetuity? Let us know what you guys think about that. And should free speech be guarded, as Seiji said, in academia, especially if it's done in an academic way and if you present your findings and facts? All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break.
Yep.
When we get back from a break, we are going to go ahead and discuss the homeless situation and are they wrecking everything for everyone and what should be done with them. We'll be right back.